We are now going to have the final in the series of what I have learned about prayer. It's been a lot of fun on Wednesday nights. And we have our two very beloved, Sherry and Ken, Lescisin, are going to be presenting. So who's going to be first? Here comes Ken. He's number one.
So, yeah, we are kind of the caboose of all of this, and so I don't really have any kind of an outline or any kind of a teaching. I mean, it's really more, just some of the things that have gone on in our lives over time, and so that's kind of pretty much what I've got to say here. I did not have the good fortune of growing up in a Christian home, so I didn't really do a great deal of praying before I became a Christian as a young adult, apart from the occasional school exam that I might have been intensely concerned with. As a youngster, I was pretty well acquainted with corporal punishment, as some of us are. So I was pretty fairly convinced that there was a God out there, but inaccessible to most folks, including myself. As a teen, I was herded through an ELCA version of Lutheranism, which did nothing to instill or reveal the need for a restored relationship that we all need with God. So when God apprehended me, I was in the military in my 20s, and that's kind of when a prayer life really started for me. That somewhat short-lived, I guess, because the allure of the world called me back for some serious crappie flopping before God made it clear that I was no longer my own, that I was bought with a price. So, as a young Christian, see my notes here. After I got out of the military, I went to got my technical education at Dunwoody downtown, and God actually drew me back to himself at JP in South Minneapolis. So at JP in those days had a thriving young adult singles group that numbered in the hundreds, literally. And in those days, I roomed with a number of other young guys my age, as it was significantly safer than some of the other 70s and 80s living arrangements of the time. Nevertheless, it was not long before I discovered that a certain young Swedish English woman was not just another pretty face. And as time marched on, a thriving relationship ensued. Not long after that, we were married in 1982. I've never really been the best of leaders. I'm a better follower, I guess. Consequently, while we had our own relationships with the Lord, Sherry and I didn't pray a lot together. Some of that, of course, is due to different schedules because she worked as a nurse, and I was pretty much a day guy. But that's something I definitely regret, but I think that as time has gone on, we've definitely improved in that area. In 1988 was a very pivotal year for me regarding prayer. A number of life-changing events occurred to me that year. In June, I had an appendectomy. In August, we became first-time parents to our son Peter. In September, I lost my job in land surveying. And in October, my father got deathly ill with influenza. He never really rallied and died suddenly at the age of 66. And November, I started a new job with the Corps of Engineers in St. Paul. But getting back to my father's illness, we were at the time quickly informed on how very ill he was. He had pneumonia and septicemia. He tarried for a couple of weeks in ICU, and as a family, and even individually for that matter, we were very much in and out of prayer times in the family lounge at the hospital. During his illness, it was the longest time that I've ever been awake, and the longest time nonstop prayer time as well. I was up during his second week in ICU for 4 days and 4 nights, praying as continuously as I could to try and bring healing to him. His passing after 2 weeks in ICU stunned our family, and the extended family for that matter. But especially my mother was crushed by the whole scenario, the 2 weeks of hovering near death, and then Dad passing. They were just 2 years into retirement, and she felt pretty alone for the rest of her life. She was very broken, very sobbing for days, and I was pretty discouraged by his passing as well, especially after storming Heaven's Gates over Dad's recovery. I felt somewhat that he and I had some unfinished living to do, because ours had not been the best relationship, which is typical for a lot of people. As a young adult, I never really had a good idea where my parents were in their walk, in their faith walk. At the time, I couldn't really believe it was happening, but at the same time, I think it was here that I learned something about the sovereignty of God. I really didn't, I didn't sense that the enemy was involved in his passing at all. It just didn't seem to me that in spite of the sudden unexpectedness, I just had a peace. While my mom was so broken by it all and was really convinced that God had not answered her prayers. It was some days for all of us to believe that the answer to our prayer was a quiet but reassuring, "No, I want you to continue on without your father." So to my mom, "I am your husband now," and to us kids, "I am your father now." At this point in time, Peter, our son, was only 2 years old, or 2 months old, I'm sorry. And in just a couple of short years, Jenna arrived. Life was so busy in those days. Sherry was working part-time, different shifts at HCMC. I was commuting to St. Paul, working full-time. We had our quiet times with God, but I felt kind of out of sorts with our little daughter. Jenna was not the happiest baby, but it wasn't until about 22 months that we discovered that something was amiss with little Jenny. We had numbers of appointments with the neurologist, and everything that Jenna was tested for genetically was negative. So there was really no answer for why this happened to her, except, the microcephaly and the developmental delay. They just shrug their shoulders and say, well, it occurred on a molecular level, which that's not really an answer, but it's the answer they give you. So I remember just really feeling beaten by this whole new development, and wondered, why would God pick me of all people to raise an impaired child into adulthood? It just, it's kind of the why me thing, I knew nothing about special needs. I'd never been around special needs kids, families, or anything else, programs, whatever. So as Jenna grew into and through childhood, I think I struggled the most with who Jenna was. It definitely isolates you to a degree. It often isn't convenient to fellowship in special needs culture, as it is just more time-consuming and often emotionally draining. So as time went on, I came to push Jenna more and more and to try to make her into something that I thought she could be. I remember trying to orchestrate some family devotions when, really on more than one occasion, but when Jenna was younger, and she was so obsessive compulsive that at that age that she just couldn't sit still. And she was just a flurry of energy. She captivated attention, but it wasn't because she wanted to. It was really because she just didn't have the ability to sit still. She just couldn't. It took me a long time to discover later in prayer that God was really satisfied with who she was. It was me who wasn't satisfied. I distinctly remember him one day when Jenna was in her early teens, impressing a thought on me so strong that I thought he was speaking audibly to me. I really did. And he said, she needs a daddy, not a drill sergeant. It was so strong, that impression, that I just couldn't get it out of my head for a week, 2 weeks, It was just, this is what I want from you. This is how I want you to deal with her, So, I clearly had some repenting to do, but by His grace, I think that that I've been more of a daddy since then. I think I had to turn around. I had to turn around and back up to where I was supposed to be. But because of the struggles or the difficulties that we struggled through when the kids were younger, I've been much more fervent in prayer for them since they've entered adulthood. And as a result, God has not been slack in their lives at all. He's been working diligently with both Peter and Jenna. Everything that you see in Jenna today that's positive has been Him. Not me. If anything, I've more gotten in the way in the past, but when you look at her today, I think you can see the Lord in her life. She's a very loving young lady that cares about people. She really does. God has accomplished great things in her life from her childhood days. And then when I look at our son Peter and wife Natalie, I'm just astonished at the hunger there that they pursue God with. Peter is just devouring apologetics from Ravi Zacharias to Lee Strobel and other people I've never even heard of. So it's just absolutely a hunger for God's word and desire for his truth. And I'm just so humbled, by how God has filled in the blanks that I left in place from my earlier years. So that's really all I've got. So.
Are we good? It's going to be a little bit more of a testimony, but I think I need to do that anyway. What? Okay, yes. I was raised in a Christian home for which I'm eternally grateful. Mom was loving and supportive, but Dad showed his love differently in living a godly life. However, he was not real good at affirming or showing his love to us. He was quite legalistic, and I grew up feeling that God was like that too. Mom told me once that Dad didn't want me to have a big head, so I felt he withheld the love and encouragement that I so much needed. I went forward as a child at Bible school, and then again at a showing of the Restless Ones in our town. I started out reading my Bible and trying to live a Christian life in high school, but soon was distracted by school, friends, and boys. After I left home, I didn't have a committed relationship with the Lord and soon fell into a sinful life, like so many in my generation, and went downhill fast. When I was 20 years old, my mom had my youngest sister at the age of 45 years. And I felt that I was so sinful that I thought my baby sister had come to take my place because I was going to die. I was under so much conviction. After a series of miraculous events the Lord used to return my attention to him, I got down beside my bed and asked him to forgive me and come into my life. And that was a real turning point in my life. I felt like I was in seventh heaven. But after that period, when I was just so on fire for the Lord and just felt so loved, I got into kind of some thinking that the Lord was just putting up with me. And I didn't really have a sense of an ongoing sense of his love for me, and that I was always somehow wrong. I was just wrong. And that led to a lot of depression in my life. Satan does like to play old tapes for you, such as you're wrong and God doesn't care about you and he cares about everybody else, especially Helen Ludwig. But he doesn't. There's nothing special in your life about your life. So I've had a poor self-image that's hindered me from believing and receiving God's love, peace, and joy. It's almost like Keith Green's words in his introduction to "Oh Lord, You're Beautiful" that we listened to last Wednesday night. Lord, you've got to do something about my heart. A lot of time has gone by since I met you, and it's starting to harden up and getting old and wrinkled and calloused. Oh Lord, my faith is small, and I need a touch from you. So as I still deal with these things, which I wish that they would have passed away a long time ago, I still deal with some of these old tapes, these old feelings. I know how important it is to stand on His word. Hebrews 4:16, let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find help in time of need. And I said all that because I know how important it is to realize that we're really loved. And that really is basic in going on in a prayer life. I also love to pray scripture, like Psalms 145, things like, I will extol you, my God, O King, and I will bless your name forever and ever. Every day I will bless you, and I will praise your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. And I've realized, too, that we can come to the Lord just as we are, just as I am. And I remember one time I was out in the Black Hills with Ken and our little son Peter, and I had a raging earache. And I just basically was shut down for almost the whole time we were out there. And I remember I was driving to meet them as they got off this 1880s train. And I just had a crying fit and a yelling fit with the Lord. And almost soon after that, my earache went away, and I just felt like it was okay with him that I had that experience. Praying in tongues has been a huge boon, is that right, to my prayer existence. I'm not a lady like those you hear that have a need to speak thousands of words per day. I'm perfectly happy with quiet. And there's so many times when, how do I pray? And the Lord has given us such a wonderful avenue to reach him. You know, being raised in kind of a legalistic home, when I came back to the Lord, I felt like, well, I needed to be down on my knees. I need to read my Bible first and then get down on my knees and pray. And of course, since that time, I have found freedom in praying when I'm in the shower or on my bike, or because I can't kneel anyway because of my knee surgery. That's in the past. I've started reading a book by Susie Larson called Your Powerful Prayers, in which she emphasizes the importance of praying like you're loved, like I mentioned before. She quotes someone called Judd Wilhite in his book Pursued as saying, God is still pursuing you after you've placed your faith in him, not to burden you with more tasks on the to-do list or to whip you into shape, but to love you. He pursues you with an intensity that can breathe life into you. And Karen, I really appreciated what you said in your talk about sometimes you felt like you had to kind of work yourself up to feel something to pray about somebody or something, and that was really good to hear. I guess I probably knew that, but it was good to hear that reminder. I thank you for listening, and I'm done.
Okay, well, I'll stand here so you can correct me as you want to do. Um, yeah, you can.